Before we get started, I just want to let you all know if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or unmute or raise your hand even, and we can stop what we're doing and answer any questions. We do have a smallish group today, so it's a good chance for you to get any information that you need, so please feel free to interact with us. And how today's call is going to go, so I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Marquee 360. I do see some familiar faces. Thank you guys for joining us. So this might be a little redundant, but for those of you who are new, I'll tell you more about our company and talk a little bit about Microsoft Planner. And then we'll talk about resource management, and Stella's going to show you our PPM360 solution. So a little bit about Marquee 360. Our company was founded by industry veterans, and what that means is they've been working with Microsoft in the project management space since the Project Server, and have followed that all the way to Project Online, and then Project for the Web, and now Planner. So they've seen a lot of iterations within the Microsoft space, and so they're very knowledgeable about innovations that are coming up and how to work with Microsoft's products and capabilities. And our core focus areas are innovation, customer success, and support. So for innovation, we take the Microsoft solutions and we give you more capabilities than they might have out of the box. And we do a lot of that using the Power Platform. We also focus on customer success. So when you do an implementation with us, we work closely with your stakeholders to make sure all of your requirements are being followed and you're getting software that works with your business process. And with support, we do training, workshops, and we work closely to make sure that after an implementation, your end users are adopting the product as well. So for the new Microsoft Planner, and if you can, just throw up your hand or react a thumbs up if you're familiar with Microsoft Planner already. If you've seen it, started using it a little bit. Joyce, anybody else? Kevin, awesome. Great. Coralie too, cool. So Microsoft Planner is Microsoft's newest innovation in the project management space, and they've put in a lot of R&D to get it up to speed with where Project Online capabilities are, but there's still some limitations. So we're going to go through that a little bit when we talk about PPM360. So PPM360 is our Planner accelerator. What that means, it just extends some of the capabilities that Planner might not have out of the box. So we use Power Apps to give you an intake process, a time tracking, timesheet app, more resource management tools, and budgeting as well. So any gaps that you're seeing that might not come straight from Microsoft, we can help you build those. And it's important for me to point out that with Planner being built on the Power Platform, the low code, no code that Microsoft is really investing in as well, that gives us the capability to and flexibility to give you those extensions. So, and they're not custom coded. So if you have in-house architects that can make some small changes or uphold and support those systems, it just gives you some flexibility to not have to keep coming back to your partner for more and more customizations. We're more than happy to help, but you won't have to totally rely on us. And these are some of the capabilities that we like to point out that PPM360 will give you. So I said the requests, lessons learned, risk issues, and as Stella goes through her demonstration, you'll be able to see those in action. So when Stella goes to share her screen, you're going to see our PPM360 interface, our homepage. But as she goes through, you might, if you're familiar with Planner, you're going to see some of those spaces where you're like, oh, that I recognize that, that's Planner. And she's going to try to point those out as she goes along as well. All right.
ready for me, Erin?
Ready.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So today's webinar is going to be over resource management. As we all know, resource management is really a key area in project management. What we're finding today in our businesses is that there are a lot of resources that are under allocated and a lot of resources that are being over allocated. So the real goal with resource management is to align our resources where everyone is doing an adequate amount of work. And we don't have resources that are over allocated or under allocated, but perfectly allocated. So I'm sharing my screen here. I just want to start from our PPM360 home dashboard. What we'll do today is we will create a new schedule in PPM360 utilizing our schedule template. I'm then going to demonstrate how resources are managed via tasks. We'll assign resources to tasks and see how resources can update their progress on tasks via planner. And we'll also look at how we can emphasize roles on resources that are assigned. And then we'll look at our different resource management sections. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and go through our key resource reports where we can see resources that are over allocated and under allocated versus via a heat map. So here we have our PPM360 home dashboard. We're going to want to navigate to our project section here. And let's go ahead and create a new plan. I'm going to go ahead and select a project template here. I'm going to apply our standard project template, and I'm going to go ahead and select save. Now I'm going to give it a couple of seconds to apply my schedule template. So the plan is still being copied, so I'm going to go ahead and wait. So what it's doing right now is it's applying my schedule template that I have created. Let's see if it's ready now. And here we go. My schedule template has been applied and I have a starting point for my schedule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a task above, call it project schedule. Yes, Gurash, do you have a question? Oh, I think he still has his plan up from Aaron's, or his hand up from Aaron's question. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say project schedule, and I'm going to make all of these subtasks. Now I'm going to go ahead and reorganize my columns a little bit here. So I'm going to add effort, effort completed, effort remaining. And here I have my assign to column, which is where I'm going to assign my resources to tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and assign myself as a resource on this task. And then I'm going to go ahead and assign Aaron. I'm going to go ahead and just assign her to this here. And then I'm going to go ahead and assign Charlene to a task as well. So I'm going through and assigning my resources to my tasks, you can see here. Now on this task here, let's say I want to assign 2 resources. It's currently set to 8 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and assign an additional resource. So I'm going to have Aaron and I both share this. And we're going to see that it's going to go ahead and increase that effort to 16. Now, I want to go ahead and touch on our resources tab here. We can see that as I assign resources to tasks, this resources tab is going to give me a nice summarization of the resource's name, the role they're playing on the project, the start and finish date based on the first task that they're assigned, the start date of the first task they're assigned, and the finish date of the last task that they're assigned, the total effort hours, effort completed, and effort remaining. So let's say that I have completed 25% on this project here. It's going to go ahead and update that in my resources tab here to show that part of that task has been completed. So utilizing our schedule here, I have my assigned to column in duration. Let's go ahead and increase the duration on one of these tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this to 8 days. And we can see here that's going to move out my dates based on the dependency that I have on this one, which is 4. Now here's my group. And as we can see here, I haven't currently added a group, but if I were to go ahead and add a group to this, I can add members to this. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding members and create a group. Now, anyone that I add to the group is going to get permission to this project. So they're going to be able to come in here and manage their tasks. They're going to be able to see risks, issues. Another way that I can share my tasks with resources is also from this manage access area. So I can actually come in here and decide who has access to this. So if I want to give Erin full access to my project, I can type her name, and then it's going to give me the permission types here. So I can give this resource read, write. I don't want her to be able to delete anything, but I want to append to, assign, and share. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with Erin. And now she has access to this project. So when she goes into her projects area here, she'll be able to see this in her all plans area based on permissions. Now going back into our schedule. I want to highlight 2 important views. And that is going to be we're currently on our grid view. We have a nice board view here as well, where tasks can be dragged and dropped. But for resources purposes, our most important ones are really going to be the people and the assignments view. We'll go ahead and touch on the other views though, such as this one here, which is our which is our timeline view here, where I can drag and drop. I can drag here to increase the duration of specific tasks. And I actually can manage the dependencies from this view as well, but it's not actually the best recommended place. It's a little finicky. So I actually would recommend just managing your dependencies from this column depends on view in the grid view. We also have a nice charts view. And if we look down here, it gives me a nice effort per person. And it's going to highlight tasks that are not started in gray, ones that are in progress in blue, ones that are completed in green, and ones that are late will be shown in red. Now, our people view is one of our key resource views. One way that I can assign tasks to resources is by coming in here and, assigning it this way. But my favorite way to assign tasks to resources is actually just by dragging and dropping. Now, one thing I'm going to do is we have a planner sync option here, which is basically going to assign or show tasks for resources that are assigned in the planner view. I'm going to go ahead and trigger this to yes and press save. And now resources are going to be able to see their tasks in the planner view. I'm going to go ahead and assign myself a few more tasks, which I can manage from the My Tasks view, which we'll discuss here in a minute. And we also have an area for goals. And specifically for resources, we have this nice assignments view. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Project Online, this is going to mimic the resource usage view. So what I'm going to do now is it's grouped by resource, so I can see the amount of hours assigned to each resource here, as you can see. But for those tasks where I have multiple resources assigned, the best view is really going to be the group by task view here, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this task here where I have multiple resources assigned. So I can see that the way it broke up the hours is that it's a 2-day task. So here it's it's 2-day task. So there's 3 hours here, 5 hours here. But let's say that I'm actually going to do more work on this task. From this view directly, I can update the assignments. So I can give myself 8 hours on this day, 8 hours on this day. And then I'm going to say Erin's going to do 4 hours on this day and 4 hours on this day. Now, currently I'm looking at the daily view, but let's go ahead and go to 3.3. We can see here that I can actually, if I go back to group by resource, I can group by week. So I can see for the week how many hours each person is assigned. And I can also group by month. So now I can see how much hours each person. So I can see here Charlene has 48 hours that she's working in March. Erin's working 157 hours in March, and I have 6 hours assigned in March, totaling 211 hours of work in March for my resources that have assignments. In April, we can see that each resource here has 8, and then I have 26 hours, as you can see here. So I can adjust these directly from this view as well. So let's say I want to make this an 8-hour task. It's going to increase here and also increase my total hours for that month as well. And it also is going to increase the hours for the task here too. There's also a yearly view, which is less commonly used, but it is good for multi-year projects. Now, I highlighted that I turned on that planner sync feature. So what I'm going to see now is I'm going to receive an email and a Teams activity notification for those tasks that I was assigned. So I can see here that I've been assigned to a task, and I can open in browser, assign you to a task in my project name, resource webinar. And then in my activities view as well here, I can see that I received all these notifications for each task that I was assigned. When I click on the task here, it's going to take me to Planner, my Planner view here, and I can see here the task, and I can see the due date. What's great about this feature is that your resources can manage their progress directly from this view, and it reads back to the schedule on an hourly workflow. So if I mark in progress or completed on this task, when that workflow runs next time, it's automatically going to update the progress on the task in my schedule here. This is a great way for resources to be able to manage their tasks directly from Planner. As you can see here, let me go ahead and refresh to get all those other tasks in here. So now we can see for my resource webinar project, I have all of these tasks here. And we can see here that Planner can also be embedded right here directly into Teams where resources can manage their tasks. Now, the value of this is that it's going to keep your project schedule up to date without you having to reach out to your resources and ask how much work they've completed on the task to then update the progress on their behalf. This gives control to the resource to be able to manage their own progress without having to have the project manager do it on their behalf. And what's also valuable about this is that only a Microsoft 365 license is required for users to be able to manage their progress on the tasks that they're assigned here. I can also click on the task to see more information about it, such as the priority, if it's a repeat task, the start date, the due date. Any notes that I've added or checklist items will also be viewed here, as well as any attachments or labels. Now I want to go back to my resources tab here and just highlight that we can see here that the roles that they're assigned, it automatically, when I assigned a task to a resource, gave what we call the default role. So we'll see when we get to the roles or the resource pool area here that each resource can be given a default role. If they don't have a default role, it'll automatically just give them a team member. But what's great is that some resources can have multiple roles. So if I want to change the role that a resource is playing on a task or on a project, I simply can click here, select edit, get rid of this role, hit enter to see my existing roles, and let's say that Charlene's actually going to be a developer on this project. We can see this updates her role to developer. And the benefit of this is that these roles are reportable. So we can pull these into a nice Power BI report, and I can say, show me resources that are this role, that are playing this role on specific projects, and how many hours that anyone with this role is assigned on any given days. So it gives you a lot of different options for role management as well as resource management on the reports, since this is a reportable feature in Power BI.
Hey Stella, we do have a quick question.
Yes.
Kevin asks, can you allocate a resource to a project or only assign to a task?
No, that's perfect to segue into my next point. So here under resource engagements, so as I add resources to tasks, their name appear here. But alternatively, I can also come in here and add a resource to the project, not at the task level. So I'm going to go ahead and add Allison to this project and say she's going to be an executive project manager. And I'm going to need her for March, the beginning of March through the end of March. I'm going to save and close, and I'm going to see that Allison's name is going to be added here, even though she's not assigned to a task. So it's not going to show any total effort hours, but if I were to go assign her to a task, then it will. But down below, we have this resource engagements table, and it's going to show Allison currently here. We can see that she's assigned to time in March, but we don't know how much because it's not pulling in any effort hours. But let's say I'm actually going to need Allison the full time, or in this case, let's say 3/4 of the time. So roughly there's 160 hours a month. So if we do 0.75 times 160 hours, that'll give us roughly how much I'm going to need her engaged in this task. I can also have the option of coming in here and saying April as well. I'm going to need her for half of her time in April as well. Ideally, you would want these two to match. So if that's the case, then I would come back here, edit, and actually say I'm going to need her through April as well. And now we can see for March and April, I'm specifying how much she needs. Now we do have a nice triggered workflow on our summary tab here where it says sync task assignments to resource engagements. If I click this to yes, there's going to be a workflow that runs in the background that will actually look at how many hours so for Charlene, for example, she's in March and April. It'll look at how her task assignments, and for April right here, it will come an update based on the hours allocated and the total hours in that month. But I don't have that trigger turned on, so I still would need to come in here and outside of assigning her tasks, also say I'm going to need her for full time or, half time in March. This is going to play into our resource allocation report, which has a great availability heat map that we'll look at here in a minute. Did that answer your question? Awesome. So resource engagements, we're also going to see resource availability area as well, also known as resource capacity. So now that I've finished creating my project, I have my tasks here that I'm managing. We've taken a look at how we can assign resources to tasks and how effort hours are based on how many resources are on a task or the duration of days as well. We also looked at our resource views that are important, such as the people view, where I can drag and drop tasks to assign them to resources. And as long as I have that planner button on, they're going to sync to planner where resources can manage their tasks and task progress directly there, reading back their effort completed on the tasks, which keeps our task up to date. We also looked at one of my favorite views, which is the assignments view, which is critical for breaking out dates, the specific assignment effort hours by day, month, or year. And we also looked at the importance of utilizing this view for tasks where multiple resources are assigned, such as this one here, and how we can manage this. Now, one thing I want to note while we're here, we can see here that these days are blocked out. That is because it is a weekend. On the back end, this is configured. So, for example, if your company has a holiday, such as Christmas or any other day, we configure on the back end what days are off. So let's say your company has March 3rd off. This will block anyone from being scheduled on that date. And if there is a task that spans from here to this date, it's going to push out that finish date to the next date when the resources are back in office. We're also going to see in our resource pool area here in a minute that there is an area called working hours where resources can request time off. Now let's look at myself here just as a quick glimpse on that. I know that for myself, I have put time off on the 12th. I have scheduled time off on the 12th for myself in this tool. So resources, so there's no time that can be assigned for me for this date. So if I were assigned to a task that was due on 2/12, it would actually push it out to the following day. As we can see here, since I'm the only one that has time off that date, it's only blocking for me, but for this task, I can still come in and assign Aaron some time on it. So having your resources keep their working time or time off up to date is going to be critical. That way we can make sure that no one is assigning them tasks on that day. Obviously, the consequence of users not keeping their working time off up to date is going to skew your project schedule because it's going to allow you to assign tasks for that resource on a day where they might be off. And that's going to skew possibly any tasks where you have dependencies where someone's task that they're supposed to start depends on that person finishing their task that they're assigned. So this is a really important way to manage this. And the next question you might have when we now go over to resource pool here, we're going to take a look at our working area here. So I'm going to go ahead and look at myself in our resources area. And let's take a look at myself. So here within the resource, this is where we can set where a resource might be assigned to a specific team. This can obviously be configured to be names or colors, whatever you want it to be. And resource type here is a user. We have my resource capacity. So my capacity to work on project work. So the other half of my time might be working on miscellaneous work, or my work might be dedicated to something else, is 50% of my time on project work. Out of that 50%, I have to utilize my time 100% of that availability time. If I were to make this 0.50, then ultimately I'm saying that I'm available for project work half of the time, but only utilize me for 25% of my overall time. I'm going to go ahead and change this back to full time. We can also have a resource rate, which is going to play into our timesheets app and other cost associated areas. So we can see here it's an hourly rate, and that can play into our budget and cost reports as well. This, of course, is not a mandatory field, and not all customers are utilizing this. I also have time zone here, which I'm going to go ahead and update to Central Time. Now let's look at my project services tab. Now, the project that I was on, I was the project manager or the owner, so it made me the project manager. But if I was on someone else's project and I was assigned to a task, my role would automatically in that resources tab show as solutions architect. The reason why is because I have here in my resources roles, I've added that I'm a solutions architect and this is my default role. However, I also play the role of project manager on the projects that I own or manage. But when I'm assigned to tasks on anyone else's project, my role is going to be solutions architect. I can assign additional roles to myself by coming in here, looking at existing roles such as executive project manager. I can say this is not my default role because I already have one. So if I try to select yes, you can only have one default role, of course. So it's going to say I already have one and I have to go make that one not my default role in order for this to be selected as my default role. I'm going to save and close, and we can see that this role is now added as part of my roles in the table here. Resource skills. Now, what's great about resource skills is if I add a skill for myself, such as certified chemical engineer, I can give myself a proficient value in this. What this is going to allow the tool to do is it's basically going to look at now In my resource skills area, when I need a specific resource that has a specific certification or skill, I can actually search my resources and say which resource has this specific skill that I might need. So for example, we have consulting, and I'm going to give myself a proficient rating in that. Now that I've added this skill here, we can see that in our skills area, I'll be able to identify myself as a resource. When someone's searching for a resource, they can filter that area and say, I need a resource with this characteristic and this rating value. Moving on to our roles area, we saw that I was able to assign a role to a resource, and this is the area where resources would come in and create new roles. Typically, this is actually done by a resource manager, and best practice is typically to limit this ability to create new roles to a resource manager or the resource department. Once a role is created, it can then be assigned to a resource, whether it be on a project or at the individual resource level. To create a new role, we would select new from here. I'm going to say IT. Let me see if I already have one. First thing we want to do first is check and make sure. So I was about to create IT lead, but we already have that. So I'm going to come in here and select secretary. I'm going to create security consultant. And description, I'm just going to put security consultant, target utilization 1.0. Save and close. And now I'm able to assign the security consultant role to a user. In our skills area, we can see general skills here. So I can see, for example, a list of resources, as you can see here, and the characteristic. Now, we can see here that resources are named that have that specific one. So let's say that I need someone filter by, I need a resource that contains, or I'm sorry, equals a certification. I need someone who is a certified chemical engineer, and I need it to be proficient. I can see the resources that have that characteristic, and then I can then identify the resource that I want to assign for my task or to a specific project. Similarly, I can come in here and say I need to have a resource that equals developer, and I need that person to at least be proficient. Now I have two resources that I can pick from. So my next step would be in going and looking at their availability on the resource report to see who has more availability to do work in the month that I need. Moving on to resource capacity. This is going to be a capacity area. So we saw that I can set a general resource capacity, but I also have the ability to come in and set it by month or year. So let's go ahead and look at myself. So I haven't set mine for 2025 yet, as you can see here, but we can see here that my capacity for 2023 and 2024 varied by each month. So in general, my resource capacity, remember we saw was 0.50, but we can see here that that is going to vary by month for these 2 years. To create a new one, I would come up here and select new. I would then select my resource name, and I could set my resource capacity for 2025. Now in our project, we saw that resource engagements table at the bottom for my specific project. This is going to be an area where we can see resource engagements for all resources across all projects. So if we take a look at my name here, my bookable resource is Stella Salome. Here's the projects that I'm on. Let's go ahead and filter this by year 2025. And we can see these are all the projects that I'm engaged in 2025. We can see that resource webinar here. And when we have that trigger sync to yes, that will sync our resource engagements with our task assignments. It's going to pull in the task that I'm assigned and set my resource engagements for this project as well. Directly from this view, I can actually edit this as well. But it's best practice to go into the project and do that. So if I wanted to change it, I would go into the project, go to the resources tab, look at my engagements down here, and adjust it accordingly. Yes, Joyce, do you have a question?
Thank you so much. So I'm thinking I'm a project manager. I'm having a discussion about, or demand manager, I'm having a discussion about resources across the projects. I'm looking at it for year 2025, for example, for you for February. I'll go back to your example. And I see like in February, looks like everybody wants Stella.
Yeah.
So this is where we would potentially have a conversation of, does everybody need her 100% of the month, or how can we navigate all those things? And then we would go in project by project and make adjustments. Is that the recommendation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're actually going to see here, this is actually a really good segue into our reports here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Joyce. I appreciate that. This is actually a really good segue into this resource availability report. So we can see here that if I go to fiscal year equals 2025, here, I'm going to look at me as a resource here and see that I'm extremely over allocated, as we can see here. So we saw that in January, I'm extremely over allocated, as you can see here. Now this report isn't reflecting, this report updates every 2 hours, so it's not reflecting this project. But if I select on my name here, I can see all the projects that I'm engaged in here, and we can see that that's quite a lot. So obviously I'm extremely over allocated for these months. So we'd actually utilize this report and our heat map here to look at individual resources on our map and see ones that are over allocated. And then I would then identify here in October, it looks like I'm identified to too many. And then we also could go in here and look at that here from this view as well. But looking at this report is typically what we recommend making those resource decisions based off of, those critical resource decisions. So I would look at this and I would need to sync with the project managers and say Stella's too over allocated. She needs to be limited.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask the question. You said that this is this is the preferred place to do it. Can you explain why this is more preferred than the other, just out of curiosity, so I can understand?
So just from my point of view, this has like a nice little heat map for us. So it's just easier to identify rather than you have to like utilize your analytical skills more here and say,
Gotcha.
it's more obvious, I would say, on the report. It kind of like screams at you versus here you have to look and say total, one,
Perfect. Okay.
one versus the resource report. It's screaming at me in red, this person's over allocated. So I just find it easier to do from the resource report.
Makes sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course, of course. So once again here, I also can not only identify my resources that are over allocated, but I can identify my resources that are under allocated. And this is where our roles would come into place. So this report can be configured to add a role filter. And I can say Stella is a project manager or solutions architect. I would filter by that. And then this would limit the resources that I'm seeing to only those that have that specific role, making it easier for me to shift work to someone else with that same role on a project. So not only can I use this report to identify resources that are over allocated, I can also add that role filter and filter that on project manager or solutions architect or whatever role I'm playing, because honestly, this is showing me with roles across all projects, and this role might vary. So we want to limit this to a specific role, and then we can come in and I can find it easier to shift to work. So let's say Narupa is available, and I use the role filter to filter a project manager, and we can identify that these 3 resources are under allocated. That makes it easier for me to shift work from one to the next. We also have our resource assignments view, and we can see here on the filter, I'm currently filtered by resource on my name. So this is going to show me resource, the project name, the tasks, and it's going to give me some task information as well, such as the start and finish date, the progress, effort hours, how many of those effort hours have been completed with a nice little bar here of completion as well, and the effort hours remaining with nice totals here at the bottom. Now, this can also be used to filter by start date or finish date, or even by month, and program name, project name, task progress as well. So if I want to see, for example, ones that are in progress, it's going to limit me to show my tasks that are in progress for my projects here. Now, not only can PMOs utilize this to identify the amount of work that resources are assigned, or their expected work, or their task progress, but resources themselves can actually utilize this report to come in and say, show me all the tasks that I'm assigned across all projects. In addition to that, once again, as long as that planner sync trigger is on, they can also identify the tasks that they're assigned here, and they can filter by due date, ascending, descending, progress, and manage it from here as well. So they actually have multiple ways to identify all the tasks that they're assigned, making it easier for resources to keep up with their tasks, manage the progress on their tasks, thereby keeping the progress for the schedules up to date as much as possible. As we know, that's absolutely critical, and it saves the project manager a lot of time as well. So they're not having to go in and consistently check in with the resource to identify how much progress is completed on this task. Now, of course, we're going to have resources that are not, no matter how many ways they have to easily update their progress. Unfortunately, we're going to have those resources that are not updating their progress. So there is still going to be, of course, project managers that need to reach out to their resources and say, hey, why aren't you updating this task? But luckily here at Marquee360, we have really nice training guides for resources. So sometimes the resource just doesn't know how. So we do find it critical, the training aspect of development and deployment, and training users, project managers, team members, all roles, to know how they can update their progress on tasks best. Now, we also have our resource dashboard report, which is going to show us some very high level information, but utilizing our filters, we can drill down on more specialized information. Now, one thing I didn't touch on, but I want to circle back, is here at Marquee360, we have a nice timesheets application here. So we can see my timesheets app. So my timesheets dashboard view here. So when users are assigned tasks, it'll pop up on their timesheet. They can actually update their timesheet with their task progress. And that's another way that we can have, either upon approval or upon submission, you would choose at the requirements phase a way for progress to read back on the tasks. So there's actually a workflows that we can create utilizing Power Automate that we can read back to the task the amount of work that has been completed. So for example, I would come in here. We can see my timesheet lines for my projects down here below. I would say you can see here there's 8 hours remaining. I would submit my work here. I would then submit my project, and once it's approved or under review, either way, there would be a workflow that runs as frequently as you would like that would read back to the schedule that way as well. So essentially, if they're not managing it via a planner, my tasks in progress, and if they're not going into the schedule, via timesheets is another way that we can have that task progress updated as well. Alternatively, you do have the option, of course, of saying, I don't want tasks to update via timesheets. I want users to update their tasks purely via my tasks. If you'd like a demo of our timesheets app, what we're looking at here is our model-driven app, but we also do, of course, have our Canvas app as well, which is a little bit of a different view, but can be embedded in here. So this is where I can see my timesheets. I can go in, and as I'm assigned work to tasks, they show up here. And the benefit of the Canvas app of our timesheets app is that users only need a Microsoft 365 license to utilize this version of the app, since it is built with the dataset SharePoint rather than Dataverse tables, which users do need a plan license to be able to access. If you would like more information in our timesheets app, please reach out to Charlene, who is on the call today, and she can set that up for you. Now at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Erin, unless anyone has any questions or any other areas they would like to see more in depth.
Awesome. Thanks, Stella. All right, I am going to put a quick survey in the chat. If you guys could fill that out, that would be great. It just lets us know that you're getting the most out of these webinars. And if you have any topics you'd like to see in the future, please let us know. Also, we do put a lot of tips and tricks on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to check that out. And if there's anything we can help with your Microsoft 365 environment, your work management, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, everyone.